This is Jail Talk, the official podcast of the Texas Jail Association. Here is your host, Johnny Jaquess.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Jail Talk. It's our podcast with the Texas Jail Association. We're here in San Marcos, Texas, at our annual conference, and it's my pleasure to have these folks with us here today. We're going to talk about small Texas jails and the issues that they face that are more challenging in many ways than some of us that run large jails. I'm in good company today. I have Robert Green. He has managed both large and small jails in Texas, currently manages a jail in Kendall County, and he has also served with the Texas Commission on Jail Standards as an inspector. And then right here to my left, I have Sheriff Ricky Jones. He is the sheriff of Franklin County, also has a small jail. And then we have Sylvia Foraker, who is a jail administrator in Kerr County, also a small jail. And so we wanted to bring this up as a topic because there's 254 counties in Texas, and there's some counties that don't even have jails. And I think we have 246. Mm-hmm. And out of those jails, people, I think most people think about Kerr County and Dallas and Houston, these big jails, but most of those jails are jails just like yours. They're small, and jails are already out of sight and out of mind, and so I can't imagine the issues that you face. Anyway, Robert, why don't you go ahead and talk about your experience since you've managed to? What do you think's the biggest difference?
Well, Johnny, I think the biggest difference is the responsibilities of the staff. In other words, when I started in Montgomery County in 1981, we were a small jail. We were a 50-bed jail up on top of the courthouse, built in 1937. And we did everything from feeding the inmates to booking them in to classifying them to giving them their medication. And over time, we outgrew that jail. I think we had 120 inmates in that 50-bed jail when we moved out. Wow. And I've forgotten the exact year, but I stayed with Montgomery County for 28 years, and I was a jail administrator when I retired, and we had 1,200 beds when I retired. And we were fortunate enough to have specialty departments within the jail. You had one unit that did inmate classification and one unit that handled disciplinary and grievances. You had a certain number of the staff that's all they did was book and release inmates. Whereas Kendall County, where I'm at now, and I consider it a small jail, we don't have any of those specialty departments. Every detention officer in there has to know how to do every job, and that's, I think, the biggest difference.
Well, sure, and I don't think people think about that, and we'll talk about the ratios. When I talk about ratios, for those listening, we're talking about one officer. It's the jail standard, one officer for every 48 inmates. Larger jails or direct supervision jails have a variance to that where they can go up to 72 inmates. When you think about that officer already having to manage that number of inmates, and then, so a large jail, I've got support staff that can help with paperwork and classifying, as you mentioned, and different things like that, all the different administrative requirements that we have. But to manage that many inmates and then also have to do all that stuff, it's just unreasonable. It's no wonder why nobody says, I want to be a jailer when I grow up. And explains the staffing shortages that we all have. And then the challenges to get a decent salary. I mean, we had to have the legislatures mandate a certain amount of pay for detention officers for the rural counties. Nobody wants to work there. And I really think that there's a huge public safety component to that. What do we do? Because the jailers are the backbone of the criminal justice system, but they get the least amount of respect. And it's because I think people just don't understand all these issues. And Sheriff, I'd like to get your perspective. I know you're also the current president of the Sheriff's Association of Texas. Maybe you're hearing some other things from other sheriffs, but I'd really like to get your perspective on those ratios.
Well, just real quick, my facility we're a 112 bed jail. Prior to that, we had a jail behind the courthouse. It was old, where the sheriff lived downstairs. It was built in 1912. We used to house, I might not should say how many we housed in there until the jail commission come in and told us we could only hold 7. But we ended up building this facility that we're in now. But when we moved into that facility, the 1 to 48 was probably okay. But over the years in between moving in there in 92, well, I'll just tell you, when I took office in 2013, I've got a 112 bed jail and I had 5 jailers and a jail administrator. And so you had 1 jailer on duty that's responsible for the booking in, the cell checks, serving the meals, checking the trays, making sure the food was there, taking care of the med, passing, and they're back there booking somebody in. They have to, I got to stop, put them up, go back and do a cell check. They were always running over themselves. Since I've been in there in 2013, I've gotten us up to 12, but I'm still a long way from where we need to be. And it's just but the 1 to 48 is an antiquated number.
It is, and I don't know where they came up with it. And sorry to interject, but I want to point out that you said 1 to 48 was probably okay back then. We are now the de facto mental health facility and the largest mental health provider in our communities. And so that plays a role in that because it's not the same. And every year we get more legislative requirements, the jailer has to do this kind of stuff. And we don't ever take away any of their responsibilities. So you don't have a full-time psychiatrist.
No.
Large jails may have that, but y'all don't have that. And not even talking about medical. So how do you deal with some of that stuff?
Well, luckily I went to the commission a few years back, and they give me the monies for a jail nurse. I have an RN that's there Monday through Friday. So a lot of jails my size don't have that, but it's I don't that's something that every jail should have, that and a mental health professional inside their jails, because we are, probably a quarter of the people in my jail or have some kind of mental health issue that needs to be addressed. We've even started doing in-house competencies, and that's kind of worked out for us. But it's a lot for, and I'm coming from a town of just over 10,000 people. My selection pool for jailers, as you said in the beginning of this, nobody dreams of being a jailer.
That's right.
And so I get a lot of young people that come in and want to be a jailer. That's one of the things I talk about in my office before they ever go back there is, do you understand what you're even applying for? This isn't a convenience store job, and a lot of people in the public don't realize what goes on behind that steel door, and these kids come back there and they're thrown into a world that they've never seen, and the pressures that they're under to make sure that every step is followed, every I's dotted and T's crossed. And a lot of times it's hard to get them to understand why that is.
And that officer might be 18 years old and was working in a grocery store like 6 weeks ago. So and then you could have one inmate, and I don't know if y'all have ever housed, contracted with a large jail to house inmates, but we had one not too long ago because they simply cannot handle a person that has serious mental health issues. That is somebody kicking the door, ripping the sink off the wall, somebody that's really acting out. How does that 18-year-old officer manage that person and all of those others by themselves? That's what the 1 to 48 gets you. And we know that we're probably not going to get any more unless the law changes. They're not just going to give us the money for it, are they?
No, they're not. It's going to require the jail commission or the state passing legislation or rules that requires a change in that ratio number. That's what it took when we had to build our new jail in Franklin County, it was a mandate from the jail commission, and I know there's some counties that won't like it, but that number has to change. It all, I always wonder what should it be, but I don't want to sit there and say it has to be 1 to 24 or 2 to 30, because there's jails in West Texas that wasn't work for.
Sure.
It almost needs to be a facility. How is your facility built? How is it managed? It needs to be a facility by facility review by the jail commission, and come in and say, this, if you build this style of jail set up this way, then you need to have X number of jailers per inmates.
Right. Well, you could come up. I think there's an argument to be had that maybe it could be classification based, but even then, it just might be too simple. I do think facility design plays a role. And then there needs to be more studies. And how many is too many for a person? Because I ask all the time about what's the ratios in a classroom. And with the statistics we have with inmates, it'd be a special needs detention class is what that would be. And that's why things happen in jails that we don't want to happen. And it contributes to the safety, issues. So what about a nursing home? How many patients per clinician in a hospital or a mental health facility? We're so heavily, we have all these requirements. We're micromanaged, really, with legislation and not given near the resources. I mean, when you're in high school, I don't remember the teacher having to come around and prove that they checked on me, had face-to-face contact once an hour, 30 minutes, depending on who you are.
That they're breathing and alive.
That's right. But it's like, I think the public just doesn't understand, and that's why we want to do these podcasts, to understand from our perspective. They see these shows on Netflix or whatever, and they see it from the inmate's point of view, but they don't have ours. We don't want bad things happen in our facilities. We want to care for our inmates, but we have too much. There's too many people that and they're not just regular public. It's the most feral people on the planet. They're sick. They got mental health issues. It's the people that we don't want on the street corners anymore, or out there doing bad things. We have, in 1997. I thought I was getting into criminal justice, but what I wound up getting in is some criminal justice, but mostly I'm running a mental health institution drug rehab, a sobering center, and really it's like a jailer is best described really more as a social worker anymore. But Sylvia, I'd like to have your perspective on that.
Okay, well, I've worked in a jail. I started out in 95 in a small jail, so I think we had maybe 15. And then I came over to Kerr County, so we started out at 192 and we're up to 328 beds. And we have the 1 to 48 ratio. But we're pushing these jailers to keep up with all the standards and all that's required of us. So it makes it really hard. Your checks that you have to do every hourly, you cut them down to 30 minutes, and so that you'll catch that hourly, and then there's some that require 15-minute checks. You're dealing with the restraint chair if you have a violent inmate, and you just can't put them in there because they piss you off. They have to be a danger to themselves or others, and the violent cell. And so we've got I always tell people when they start the new ones, is that I think the job is more mental than it is physical because of what we carry. And we carry it all the time, take it home with us and all. And, you're trying to keep morale up, you got to explain to them this care, custody, and control. And those are the things that we're required to make sure, they're being fed right, and they're able to shower. And if they can't shower, then, we're having to help with that. And clean their cells. If they can't clean their cells, we're in there cleaning their cells. And so there's just a lot, and we put a lot on these jailers, and we can't do it alone. That we're a team. I'm lucky I've got 43 working in my department, and that's with clerical and staff, including myself and lieutenant, and so we all just jump in and do what we have to do to get them through it.
We're sure, but I think about that, going back to that 1 to 48, and if you're talking about putting somebody in a restraint chair or
One
having
person.
Yes, you got one you're checking on every 15 minutes because they're in a restraint chair,
And we can't be. It can't
and then
be
you
14.
still have 47 others that one officer has to look after. There's no way we can manage that ratio and supervise people correctly.
Maybe if it was a perfect world, and that would still, with today's requirements and mandates, it's impossible. But it has to. Everything has to be perfect.
And it's the
Nothing
documentation.
changes. Yeah.
Yes.
Documentation takes itself is so important. So we got to make sure that's all done.
Right.
And Johnny, the 1 to 48 ratio does not take into account the other ancillary requirements that a jail is required to do, such as take inmates to the dentist or the doctor.
Transports.
Your transports, now that's a subtraction from your staff on the floor.
I don't have a hospital in my county, so if I have to carry one to the hospital, I have to go to a neighboring town. And Lord forbid if I have to admit them.
Then you're really in a bind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how do we fix this? I think about the way that county government. I was visiting with somebody earlier. You have this Department of Government Efficiency, and they're finding all this waste, and I think the lay person out there thinks that there's a lot of wasted funds in government, and perhaps there is in the federal system. I don't know. It seems like they're finding some, but in county government, it is lean. It's like I know many of us are just begging for money because we know the need. I've never seen any wasteful spending in almost 30 years of county government, but it's
We all try to be good stewards of the public's
Right.
monies,
Sure.
and get the best bang for the buck that we're getting.
But you have to have public service. We have to have a jail. I know it's expensive, but it really is. I mean, I think about how many politicians are actually coming in and darkening my doorstep and looking at what's going on in the jail. And I won't put y'all on the spot, but I just don't think they know enough about it. I think there's some implicit bias. I also think that just by design, it's going to fail. It's destined to fail because the politicians that are the funding authorities don't get elected if they spend money and raise taxpayers' money. And so that's why, we don't get it. How do we break that? But
we're also the first ones to get the phone call from the public when Johnny's out there needing to be in our facility.
Yeah, you're going to get the blame, Sheriff. If somebody dies in your jail, you're the one being investigated.
Yep. Yeah.
And you clearly, just on what we talked about today, we haven't even gotten into a lot of other issues, but you don't have the resources. No sheriff wants no jailer wants any person to die in their custody if there's a way to prevent it. But I think it all goes back to that ratio. We could do so much better if we had more officers to supervise them, and then
and just real quick on the ratio thing is the safety of the inmates and the safety of the officers. I've seen recently some incidents that have occurred that that may be the only jailer that's on duty that's handling. We got just some of ours. I know yours is probably larger than y'all's, but 6-8 man pods. I got one jailer that's managing that. Well, if they have a fight in there, he's going to go in there and shut the door behind him.
Good point.
Who's there to back him up? How long is it going to take? Luckily, I get along with the police department there in Mount Vernon, so the city will respond. But if I know some counties that they don't, and so if they need a backup, they're going to have to wait for a deputy to drive back into town to go back there and help him. And it doesn't take just a few seconds for that to get to really, really bad.
Sure.
For that corrections officer, and that's just every 2 years we're mandated, and get some of these mandates that we get passed down to us from legislation. They're things that need to be taken care of.
Sure.
But we keep passing all this down, and we keep putting this on top of 1 to 48. 2 more years, we get all these mandates and all this required training. You know, it's hard for me to send people off and get the training in the 2-year period that they have to, because I don't have anybody to work for them.
Absolutely.
You know, so I beg instructors to come to my facility and offer the same class multiple days in a row. But you know, these mandates keep piling up, and we keep adding all these requirements to that 1 to 48 jailer. Yet we're not changing the 1 to 48, and that's got to change.
Well, in that legislation, maybe, there's so much mental health going on in jails. We just need to train the jailers more, right?
Yeah,
Make them mental health experts. I mean, it's worked out really well out on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Train everybody to be a mental health expert. That'll solve it.
That's big. Mental health is big.
It is.
You know, I would argue that the jailers are probably the most mental health experts on the planet right now, because they do so much more interaction with them. I've seen these jailers just do very, very well intervening in crisis situations, and I know you all have too. But going back to that situation you described about having backup, these officers do not have firearms. Most of the time, they do not have tasers, pepper spray. They've got these guns right here. They've got what limited training we're allowed to get them, because we don't have the budget for defense tactics. I mean, we just published a video that shows in one of these small jails in Bailey County, an officer goes in and intervenes in a suicide attempt. This guy's fixing to hang himself. And he goes in there to get him down, and that guy breaks loose and shanks him several times. And it's pretty graphic. It's on the video. Hopefully that'll get some people's attention. But if it was on the streets and you had a fight call with 50 people, 48 people, how many police officers would they go by themselves to that?
No.
How many would?
They'd call the cavalry out. The neighboring counties would show up.
But there's no cavalry in the jail.
No.
You know, and sometimes, fortunately, inmates come to their aid.
It's a little island world back there that nobody sees.
And sometimes you have to just shut it down till you can get the manpower there, because we got to make sure we're safe too in going in. So we're going to do everything we can to take care of them, but we got to remember ourselves. And so you get the manpower you need to be able to go in. And you know, we've had to wait on a few things, so you want to take care of your guys too, and they need to know that you're there for them.
We have to do it smart.
But you know, on the civil side of that is whenever they're showing this in civil court, when somebody gets hurt in the cell, well, y'all just stood there. Why are y'all just standing there? Well, we're waiting to make sure our staff are safe.
Look at that one situation where that officer got shanked. He would have been right for not entering that cell until he had other people there to help. Yep. You don't want anybody to die, but that was sort of a trap. Maybe it was intentional trap. I don't know, but I think a lot of jails have policies.
There's policies.
Do not enter the cell by yourself.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what other, if we could change the ratio, what do you think the strategy would be? Like, do you think it's more classification based? Do you think we should have a university study this stuff, or?
I think it'd be
where do we start?
I think it'd be a good deal for maybe CMET or the jail commission to go in together and do some studies. There's got to be a change. We can't continue the road that we're on with what it's broken. So there does need to be a study. I think maybe it's facility based and classification also, but I think if a group came in and did a study on that and went to some small jails and larger jails and broke down the needs.
It could take a while.
It could take a little while.
So what if in the interim, until then, we did something like, based on the smaller jails in your design, what if they're a special needs inmate, or if they're they require more observation, if they have serious mental health issues, kind of your special housing type inmates, what if would 1 to 24 in that, is that a good start, or you think that's probably not even enough? Some places are talking about, I think that's, I mean, if it was special needs, if this was a special needs situation, classroom or a group home, they would never even have 1 to 24. I don't think. I think it'd be like 1 to 16 or 1 to 5 maybe.
I think some of the classes they got two to a child, depending on the severity.
Oh wow, yeah.
Uh,
But it's like if you get charged with a crime, it's like, where's all the advocates now on how many people are in there? What happens if they're a child, if they're in a juvenile setting, they get more resources. The moment in Texas or probably everywhere, you turn 18, it turns into a human storage situation. Lock them up and throw away the key. There's a lot of people that come into jail, as you all know, that may have IDD. I mean, we have an IDD committee now I never would have thought we'd have that with the jail commission. And so there's people that do get arrested that have some serious issues, the mentality of a 6-year-old. And I've seen it, or an elderly person with dementia. So I'm not a social worker or a caretaker, and I don't know what hospitals have. I think CMIT would be a good place. If they had the resource to do it. I think Texas Tech University, maybe university, any of these large universities, I think could.
I think any of the larger universities could put a group together to come in and study that.
Sure.
They seem to have done a good job with the risk assessment scale that the jail commission uses to determine how often you need to be inspected. And so I would have confidence in seeing it through Sam Houston State.
Sure. And we did ask in another podcast, Cody Scott was here from National Institute of Corrections, and I asked him if he would, see if that's a topic. I think that would be a good study for them to take on as well. But we're about to wrap up, and so what would be the message that you would want to send everybody out there? If you could, some final words, what do you think you would tell them about a small jail, or that they may not know?
Well, I think that the general public doesn't realize what a difficult job it is to run and operate a small jail. And I would encourage folks in the community to come up and get to know your jail administrator. See if you can take a tour of the jail. Walk in there and see what those folks do 24/7. And you'll probably leave with a greater appreciation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think most jails would allow that we have tours.
We do it all the time.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Get involved.
I would let one of my local taxpayers come in anytime. I like that idea, Robert. Come up and see. I have people in my county that I've known for years that have driven by, and they'll ask me, how many inmates you have up there? They're thinking I'm going to say 10 or 12.
Yeah.
85. In that little building, you got 85 people stacked in there? Yeah, I do. Do you have any murders? So I'd be happy for them to come up on an evening time on a weekend and just sit there and, come in and sit and dispatch. What goes on in there and what goes on in the cells. You can sit there and hear when they buzz up to the control desk and ask for things, or ask for an ambulance, or or any of the other supplies that they may need back there. And just I think we're setting, in some situations, I feel like we're setting these young kids, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, up for failure. And not only do we have the people in the jail with disabilities, but it's putting a lot of pressure and a lot of mental issues on the people that we have working for us. That get nothing.
Correctional staff have the highest degree of PTSD and other conditions of any profession on the planet, including the military. There are studies on this.
And it's no wonder.
It's no wonder, and it's not just from seeing all this bad stuff every day, and it comes from just the amount of stress that they're under, and we overwork them because there's nobody to take their place. Day in and day out, it's shift worker fatigue, it's the micromanagement, it's the torment from the inmates. It is just, none of this stuff, if we really paint the picture clearly on a poster, would make a good recruiting poster.
No.
No, for sure.
It's like the only thing you need to pay them well. We need that draw to get them in and want to work in a jail, but it can also be very rewarding. But I just think it's particularly tough on you guys.
It's scary to think about these 18-year-olds coming in, but I also try to look at it on the other side that that's our future. Mm-hmm. And so the best thing that we can do for them is to train and keep training. And I feel like training is every day. It's not just go sit in the classroom and learn. You go through the jail school. It's an everyday thing that you have to do. And it's something that I harp on a lot at the jail, because everything we do, at any conversation we have, should be training, and giving scenarios of things that happen and kind of open their eyes to what they're getting into.
Absolutely.
And, we have citizens academies. When they come in, we've had different ones that want to come in and take the jail tours. And they always say that that's the highlight, because not only that, when they come in, we also show them the contraband we've gotten from the jail. And these could be anywhere from stingers to tattoo pins to shanks, to anything. These guys got, all they have is time, and so they're always coming up with stuff that they create. So we also got to be ready for that, that anything we give them, that it can be a weapon to us. So, but the young ones are our future. And
well, to your point, they're not being supervised by enough officers that they have the time to make this stuff.
No, you got to.
They're making this.
Teach each other
There's
and
not
work
enough
with each
people
other.
to watch them, and they know when we're coming around, because the one guy, they're gonna hear his keys jingling. They
Oh,
know,
yeah. Oh yeah. I always try to tell them, don't go the same way, don't do the same thing, because they
That's
know
right.
us better than we know
They
ourselves.
sure do.
So
Well, I'll add one comment. We talked about the 18-year-olds. When I came out of the military, because we talk about, if it's good enough for the 18-year-old to be able to go into combat and join the military, it's good enough to work in a jail. Working in a jail is different. Psychologically, and a lot of the fear is not from being assaulted. It's, I'm going to lose control. I'm going to get humiliated. They're going to say stuff all day long. How do I control that? I don't want to violate policy. I don't want to violate somebody's rights and these sort of things. And so it's different. It's psychologically damaging on a person to be in an environment like that.
You're talking about bullying.
Right.
It's not, I was thinking that earlier, when they're in school, they come out of school worried about how they're dressed, and they come in there, and every time they go to a cell, they get threatened or, and talked down to, and, threatened a lot of times, and they're not worried about what they had to do. They're worried about what could happen to them.
Absolutely. And it's like we watch these shows, these documentaries, and the inmates get, we have the inmates and they're giving their perspective, like, this officer didn't care about my issues, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we expect them to have this perfect, good attitude, customer service thing. And as we described, there's one of them trying to meet all these needs. But listen, we got to wrap up. I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate y'all being here, and I look forward to seeing y'all at the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Jail Talk, the official podcast of the Texas Jail Association. To learn more about the Texas Jail Association, visit us at texasjailassociation.com.